Thanks for joining us for this panel discussion. Hopefully we'll enlighten you with a few things, but hopefully you'll enlighten us with some great questions, and we'll keep it as interactive as possible. It's a small group here, so we want to take full advantage of some brilliant minds sitting here to the left of me. So I'll start off with a brief introduction to everyone, and then I'll pitch them a softball to start off, and let them tell you a little bit more about themselves and what they do. And then I'll introduce myself. I'll go last. But so just to my left is Lisa Mendoza, and Lisa's with Bayer. She came through the acquisition of Burlex, I was about 10 years ago or so. So she's had experience in smaller companies and larger, and she's part of the innovation group that sits in South San Francisco, right next to UCSF. So I think she can share some interesting stories about how to bring in entrepreneurs and early stage companies and how to get them going. And then we'll look right to the left of us and ask Frank how we're going to fund those. Because Frank's been very active in the investment community for a great number of years, former colleague of me at J&J. And Frank is based right here in San Diego as well. So welcome, Frank. And then Stuart Collinson with Genesis Equity, and Stuart is also principal at Arcturus, a small biotech here in the San Diego area that I know well. That is a graduate of a J Labs facility that we have in our La Jolla facility, and I can talk a little bit about that J Labs model and how that works as well. And then finally, at the end, Nancy Hong, who just joined us, and welcome Nancy as well. So. So we'll just go left to right here. We'll start with Lisa, so Lisa, just tell us a little bit more about the model that Bayer has built in South San Francisco, and how that works with the mothership, I'll call it, because I'm part of the mothership of J&J, and how you figure out what to do, how to do it, and then as part of that, what's really exciting? What do you see that's exciting in the space that you're operating that gives us hope that we're going to tackle some of these big problems in healthcare we're facing?
Well, that's a loaded question, Barry. Thank you very much for the introduction, and I'm very happy to be here. And hopefully everybody's enjoying the beautiful weather outside. It's a little warm, which is nice. I was just telling these guys that I haven't been back to San Diego for a while. I'm a graduate of UC San Diego, and I think I wore long pants about 2 times per year, while I was a graduate student. Never had to dress in business clothes. It's a bit more challenging. So as I just mentioned, I graduated from UC San Diego, and then I moved up to the Bay Area and did a postdoc in UC Berkeley, and that was in cellular and molecular immunology. And then I moved on to industry and took a position as a scientist in Burlex Biosciences, which is part of Sharing AG, and worked at the bench and then worked leading projects in both biologics and small molecule drug discovery and lead optimization. And one of those actually made it into the clinic, so that was exciting. When Bayer took over Sharing and thus Burlex in 2007, I was acquired along with the company and managed to stick around for the last 10 years. Initially moved into cardiovascular research, and in 2009 was pulled into a new group that Bayer formed called Science Hub, which was really the predecessor to what is now a global organization within Bayer called External Innovation Alliances. And that's about a 40-person group that covers external innovation across the globe. As Barry mentioned, the mothership is essentially in Germany, and Bayer's a German company, and our research footprint is firmly focused in Germany, and we have research hubs in different locations around the world. One is the West Coast Innovation Center, which is actually in Mission Bay, San Francisco. It's not South San Francisco. We're in the heart of the city, really, right across from the UC Mission Bay campus, and so we have easy access to the academics there. There's a lot of innovation. It's in a thriving ecosystem with a lot of other small biotechs. And sort of to get to Barry's question around what kind of stuff are we doing within our local center, we have a research group there on site that's focused on a number of different sort of platform functions, but we also have our incubator based in Mission Bay, co-located with our research center. It's called our Collaborator. It's a catchy name. I didn't name it. It's called the Collaborator, and the idea there is really that we bring in early biotech companies that are working in areas that are of strategic interest to Bayer. These aren't necessarily areas that we're already working in, they're more high-risk areas. So, we're not gonna do that kind of high-risk, really early stage innovative research in our own labs, simply because we have the business, that we have the requirement to really bring forward new molecules into the clinic. But we know that that's important. It's critical for the success of our company. I think it's critical for the success of pharma and biotech in general. And so we started this Collaborator incubator in 2012 and started with 6,000 square feet. We have 5 companies based in the Collaborator right now, 4 of which we have active collaborations with, and we've developed relationships with them. And we don't invest any monies, any funding into these companies. We don't have any equity, and it's simply a lease agreement. But these collaborations that we form, we bring our expertise, we bring a lot of knowledge to some of these early fledgling companies that has really helped them to move their companies forward. Most of them started with mom and pop funding, and now I think all of them have Series A funding, and they're all doing very well. The model has been working so well that we just decided this year to expand our Collaborator from a 6,000 square foot facility to a 40,000 square foot facility. So we're really excited about that and the opportunity to interact with more companies. We have a number of other different models I'd love to talk about, but I know that I have colleagues who probably want to tell you a little bit about what they're doing.
Yeah, we'll
So I'm gonna stop right there.
So one question I'll ask is what does Bayer want? We'll hold on to this thought, but what does Bayer want out of these collaborations? Before we do that, we'll move over to Frank. So Frank is Lumira Capital, yeah, and a serial entrepreneur, been CEO and chief operating officer and chief investor and many things. So Frank, you've experience in running small companies, large companies, and senior positions. As a key investor for many of those. Tell us a little bit more about what you're currently doing, and what is it that you're looking for in terms of an investment? I think this group in particular would be really keen to know what do they need to get your attention to say, hey, you're going to take a lead on a Series A.
Cool stuff, low valuation. Just kidding. Is this working? Yeah? Well, okay. I don't even really need it, so. So thanks, Barry. Thanks for the invitation to be on the panel. So Frank Stonebanks, I'm a venture partner at Lumira Capital. For those of you who don't know Lumira, so we're a Toronto-based North American diversified life science and med tech fund. About $600 million under management. We just had a first close on our 4th fund. It's a $200 million fund, which will be about 80% allocated to life science therapeutics, about 20% to med tech type stuff, and 10% to special situations, which means it doesn't fit in one of the other 2 categories. So here, Barry was very kind in his introduction. I think one of the things that hopefully can benefit this audience in terms of at least my background, and I'd really like to get to your questions, since this is really supposed to be something that can help you guys out in your businesses and your fundraising and so forth, is I have worn a lot of hats over the last 23 or so years. God, I sound so old when I say that, don't I, Nancy? I'm really only 42. I've worked as an operator and as an investor in different settings, 3-time biotech CEO, so I know the struggles that many of you are going through in terms of raising capital through the different types of groups. One of those companies is still, actually 2 of those, the 3 companies are still quite going concerns and doing, quite well. So glad about that. I spent a number of years at J&J, as Barry said, both leading global marketing for the biologics group at Centocor prior to the acquisition by J&J, and then spent a number of years at JJDC, which of course is J&J's venture arm. As well. I took a bit of a side turn to go into healthcare IT for a couple of years. So I was running healthcare M&A for IBM in New York. for 2 years, and they had a fund of funds, which we were an LP in about 30 VCs globally. And quite ironically, Lumira actually was the very first LP check I cut back in 2007 or something. It was the first fund or something like that. So I've worn the LP hat, the GP hat, the CEO hat, and then I was recruited back to Toronto actually around 2010 for 3 years. I was still living in New York. I was married to a Wall Street trader, so she wouldn't let me leave New York, so I had to sort of stay in the city. And to be Chief Business Officer at a cancer institute in Toronto called the Ontario Institute for Cancer Research. Does a lot of work in genomics and so forth. And so that was actually a great experience. We had a small seed fund, a lot of small convertible debt type investments, but it was great to wear sort of the, it was backed by the government of Ontario, so it was sort of not-for-profit institute. So it's just been great, at least for me, to wear a lot of different hats over the years, and now doing the venture partner thing with Lumira kind of a few days a week. And the other hat I wear currently is as an executive in residence at UCSD, so your former illustrious institution, which is a fabulous campus, and basically they assign sort of EIRs, the different verticals in the university, healthcare, life sciences, engineering, technology, et cetera, basically to better help UCSD connect its internal innovation ecosystem with professional investors on the outside as well as strategic investors on the outside, which is something that the university has not done necessarily the best job of over the years, although I will say the UC system is, by the numbers, is the most prolific. So those are the kind of hats I've worn or am wearing, and look forward to your questions.
Well, thanks, Frank. Stuart, I'll turn it over to you. So Stuart is Executive Chairman at Arcturus, right? It's Genesis Capital. So not only leading a small biotech lab based right here, and I have an interesting story around Arcturus. So it's a good story, actually. So, one of the founders, Joe Payne, actually is a good friend, and he's Arcturus is a graduate of our JLabs facility right here in the La Jolla campus, and just up the road and up 5, I guess we should say, right? So tell you a little bit about that event. So Joe just raised the Series A and was really excited. We spoke together on a panel in Cambridge, Mass, and we went out to dinner as a small group, and we're in a cab, sharing a cab back across the Charles River, and Joe said, "Hey, I hate to pop your bubble, but here's the study you need to do." And we had no existing agreement at the time. He said, "I can't afford to do that. It'll suck up too much cash." And I said, "You're going to have to do that if any big pharma is going to be interested in your platform." And he bit the bullet and did it, and it worked great. And we and others have done partnerships with Arcturus since then. But, so he probably didn't know that story. You can go back and check with Joe and make sure I got the stories right. But yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and kind of what you're looking for in terms of investment opportunities.
Yeah, thanks, Barry. So, I mean, actually, a little bit like Frank's introduction, I've done quite a few different bits and pieces. I'm going back, my PhD was in physical chemistry, and then winding forward a bit, I was with Glaxo on several global positions before moving out to the US to run Aurora Biosciences. We sold that to merge them with Vertex, and that's proven to be a great outcome. It had a lot of ups and downs along the way. I was on board for about 10 years there, to around 2011. But what started out at when we merged the companies at about $2.5 billion has risen to about 32 today. So it's been a great to see that company develop. The CF technology came out of the labs here in San Diego, which goes to show what can be achieved by early stage companies, and products are now getting on the market out to patients. So very, very satisfying. So after the close of the transaction, I was thinking about what to do next. Joined Forward Ventures here in San Diego, and was with Forward, I guess technically still am. We are wrapping up the 5th fund at the moment. We're not raising a new fund. And I'm doing a few different bits and pieces, including venture partner with Genesis Capital. And then a couple of exec chair roles, things like that. And as Barry mentioned, working with one company called Arcturus, which is an RNA company, and we're having a lot of fun developing that company, and hopefully chewing hard on the heels of Moderna, our East Coast competitor. So I look forward to discussing what we're looking forward to on this panel, and really, it's just like Frank said, actually, Genesis is very much as Lumira is, kind of various stages, typically earlier stage, but a fairly eclectic taste for investment opportunities.
Thank you, Stuart. And Nancy Hahn is Managing Director of Riverbest. So Nancy, tell us a little bit about yourself and what kind of investments you guys lead and what you're looking for.
Sure. So, such a great honor to be on this panel. It's funny, Lisa and I crossed paths. I got my PhD at Berkeley in the same division of immunology as her. And then did my postdoc in cancer biology at UCSF before moving down to San Diego, finished up my postdoc at UCSD, and then went to biotech as a scientist at a startup company. So that was really my first exposure to the biotech industry. And as one of those early scientists, got pulled into a ton of BD discussions around in-licensing, out-licensing. So got some exposure to the whole business side of the enterprise. Actually got my start at Forward Ventures. So Stuart was the person, one of the 4 partners to hire me and give me a chance in venture capital. And they were looking for a person that had kind of enough scientific background that could learn kind of the VC business as she went along. So always grateful for that opportunity. Stayed here in San Diego. As Forward was not, raising another fund and doing new deals, I went over to the Novartis site here, GNF it's called, and operated kind of as a, almost like a venture partner in a way, looking for interesting projects that the Novartis site didn't necessarily know about, but could be additive to their programs. So it's almost like being a VC without any specific fund. And then ended up consulting, but got back into venture capital with a group called Biomed Ventures, which was a corporate VC fund. Like Frank's, we did direct investment, but we also did LP investing. And so we had a fund that had 14 life science VC funds in it, and it was a great way to kind of see all the different practices in the venture community. How do people approach doing due diligence? When their company goes public, how do they decide when to exit? All those things. Really nice perspective on the other side of the industry. And then about a year ago, joined Riverbest, which has long been active in San Diego. We have another managing director here, Niall O'Donnell. But we're actually headquartered in St. Louis, which is another unusual kind of geography. We are very geography agnostic. We'll start a company wherever the management team, the right management team is. We bring in assets from all over the world, really. It is a very hands-on group. They like to build companies and put together teams and decide clinical strategy. But that said, they are usually forming these companies around kind of later stage assets, things that really are almost ready to go to the clinic. On the earlier side, we started a small seed fund last year, $15 million, really dedicated to preclinical things. So we mostly do therapeutics. We definitely are interested in medical device and have had a lot of success there, but probably like Frank, it would be the minority of things going forward until the investing opportunity gets a little bit healthier, maybe more people active and more syndicates that we can build. So yeah, again, looking forward to participating on the panel.
Thanks, Nancy.
Questions.
Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah, very good. So just briefly introduce myself, Barry Springer. I head up strategy innovation for biotherapeutics at Janssen, R&D. And I have the privilege of having 2 jobs currently. One is external innovation and strategy. I do sit within the mothership within the R&D organization, so I partner very closely with our innovation centers, which are based in Menlo Park, Cambridge, Mass, London, and Shanghai, where we have a complete suite of experts in disease areas and platforms. Of course, J&J's, we're pretty diverse. We're interested in medical devices, consumer products, and drugs. I'm in the drug side and the pharmaceutical side. So we work very closely with those innovation centers who are looking to find partnerships and develop partnerships. At the same time, I run a research group within biologics. I have a responsibility for delivering on an internal portfolio, and I have a responsibility of competing with that internal portfolio and ideas with external opportunities, so that's fun sometimes. But no, it is, I'm an R&D person by training, and I do have links to both this area and Berkeley, since everybody keeps talking about Berkeley. I postdoctored Berkeley with Peter Schultz, whose name is known well in this area, and a number of years ago. Pete's still a good friend, and the caliber model is one that I'm pretty intrigued with as well. So So I'm going to just lay something out here, and we'll be interested in everybody's feedback. And by the way, we had a pre-call, and I said, I'll pitch you guys all the softballs you want. They said, no, we want to have some challenges. So we'll have some challenges, right? So as I stand back and I think about what we're looking for within J&J in terms of new opportunities, and we can talk about how the best way to fund those, how to get them going, but we seem to have all the pieces of the puzzle together, right? So we have great ideas. There's a lot of great ideas out there. Money, there's a lot of money available now, right? I mean, you guys can argue with me, but we see those ebbs and flows. There's never enough, right? Cash is king. But there's a fair amount of capital available for the right ideas and in the right areas. So we've got great ideas. We've got great scientists who want to put those ideas to work. We've got money. We have facilities, so the J&J Labs organization now, so the flagship, of course, was in La Jolla. We've now opened up we're in South San Francisco, we have Toronto, we have Houston, we're going to open up in New York City, and it's continuing to expand, right? And so well over 100 different companies that sit within those, and the vast majority of them have no dedicated collaboration within J&J. We mentor them, we talk to them, we provide them opportunities to meet investors to try to make them successful. We're trying to help build that ecosystem. Some of which will come back and work with us closely, like our Therapeutics, which is one of the success stories. So we have facilities, and we have willing buyers, right? So the companies like Bayer, J&J, we're anxious to buy those great molecules, those great technology platforms, wherever they are. So why aren't we better at this? So we seem to have all the pieces together. What's missing? Is there something there what's the secret sauce to tie this together so we can really open that funnel and get access, both capital resources, what people need to test their ideas quickly, either get in, fail fast, and move on to something else, or to really plow through and it'll make them successful. So, Nancy, you're shaking your head, so I'm going to give you the first crack at it. Go ahead. What are we missing here?
Fail fast, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think, what Rivervest is struggling with is, we are very, very comfortable with the niche indication, where you get into the clinic, you can fail fast because you're doing small trials where there's high unmet medical need, and the FDA is willing to work with you on innovative endpoints, how to define success and how to get to that answer really quickly. How do we translate that outside of the niche indication, outside of the orphan diseases, to things that, we all acknowledge there's so much medical need in diabetes or obesity, any of these general practitioner kind of indications where, the science tends to be more complex, but that doesn't mean we can't develop, really well-based therapeutics against certain modalities of the disease, but we can't test them quickly and we can't figure out which ones are going to fail quickly. It's very difficult, right? I mean, my first biotech experience, we were doing diabetes and we got all the way to phase 3 and the FDA asked for, the cardiac mortality outcomes, and it's just not a feasible business model for biotech, for VC, even difficult for big pharma to do, right? So that's one area where I feel like we need to keep working with the FDA on how to really change the clinical path, because to me that seems like a big roadblock.
So when you say fail fast, you're talking fail quickly in the clinic if we're not really going to be, okay, so you take things into the clinic if we meet all the standards. So
Right.
you're talking about that stage, okay. Before we put the real investment in.
Right.
Yeah,
That's kind of our perspective,
Yeah,
is that
okay.
we're pretty comfortable in the orphan disease space, and we feel like we can prosecute that on venture capital dollars in a very focused way, but how outside that space can we do it?
Okay. Anybody else?
Well, I think it's a great point, and I think just to play off it a bit, it's gonna require a lot of innovation in a couple different areas you talked about, because I don't know about the other investors on the panel, but if someone walks up to me and says cardiovascular or primary care opportunity, my eyes glaze over. Because it's huge, it's long, it's expensive, the regulatory burdens are so high, and this can apply to several different areas, cardiovascular, metabolic, obesity, diabetes, all of which there's a lot of unmet need. Everybody will, for sure say that, but the challenges that are there are also tremendous. So then the question becomes, okay, where can you have innovation? And it doesn't necessarily have to only be product or scientific innovation. It could also be business model or capital innovation. So for example, The last company that I developed and was founder CEO of was a JLabs company, initially as an Exchange exec, and then I went to found this company and basically struck a very large option structured deal, and a very proprietary and unique type of option structured deal with Celgene. We had a partial exit from it about a year ago. Was innovative in a financial way that understood how strategics think, and that is they are limited by their capacity on an EPS basis. There's only so many things they can throw at it from a P&L and an EPS perspective. They are constrained because they have certain targets, public targets they have to meet as public companies. So if you think about that, then think about designing, something that can enable these companies ways to get more R&D shots on goal, but doesn't disrupt their EPS targeting. And so that's essentially what this particular business model did. So I guess the only point I would just make is that there can be innovation in multiple areas, both scientific as well as business model innovation, capital structure, the caliber models of the world. There's various flavors, Baskin Robbins now, there's many flavors of this kind of going on. So I think there's possibilities across the board.
Frank, you made a comment regarding cardiovascular disease and the cost and the large sizes of those clinical trials. And that's one of the areas that Bayer's committed to working in. It's one of our pillars of research is cardiovascular disease. So this is something that we've thought about quite a bit. And certainly we've partnered with other pharma companies. But I think one of the models that we've just recently sort of introduced is this life science center that we have, where there's a number of sort of potentially breakthrough technologies out there that we know are gonna impact human health. They have the potential, at least great potential to do that. We're sort of getting beyond the time that we can pick these low-hanging fruit. Those have already all been done for the most part. And so for example, the last deal that the Life Science Center signed was with Versant Ventures to form Blue Rock Therapeutics, which is focused on stem cell therapies, and particularly iPS cells for therapeutic development, which is sort of pretty out there, given the potential for oncology and stuff like that with iPS. And previous to that, the first deal they signed was with CRISPR Therapeutics around formation joint venture called Casebia, looking at gene editing technologies. I mean, the goal for the Life Science Center is to really look at a number of different areas that could really impact therapeutic disease, like, for example, the microbiome or RNA delivery. And so I think we're at the stage now where we really have to think outside the box. The sort of Me Too therapeutic. I mean, pharma's not interested. At least Bayer's not interested in those kinds of opportunities. We really want breakthrough innovation, and part of what we're doing is funding the formation of those kinds of companies. It's a little different than the standard or the classical venture model, but it's another way to approach these. But I think it really has to come down also to the science in terms of what we're selecting to invest in. Not only our internal resources, but our capital as well.
Anything to add, Stuart?
Well, I'll just maybe provide a contrary perspective, or maybe perhaps complementary. I mean, I agree with what Nancy says about diabetes, for example, and Frank about cardiovascular. But I also hear Lisa's comments as well. And one thing I wonder a little bit about is, if you went back quite a few years around the time that Genzyme was in its ascendancy, a lot of people in a room would sit around laughing, saying, "Really, you're going to be treating these little tiny orphan disease populations?" And what concerns me a little bit is the pendulancy. I mean, everybody these days wants to be an orphan disease company and wants to charge huge amounts of money and have small patient populations with a biomarker, and it goes on and on. So whereas Genzyme was a bit of a joke, and obviously clearly wasn't, but it's, I think the whole orphan thing is becoming too much of a simpler, and it really isn't. And I think there's going to be huge reimbursement pressure. And I think, when you see particularly some extreme cases of pricing out there where people are charging $500, $600, maybe $1 million a year to treat a small patient population, I really wonder whether governments are going to be prepared to accept that. So the question is, I actually think primary care can be interesting. The question is, how do you go about it? I was involved as more as an entrepreneur, not an investor, in a European company working in the asthma area. Now, asthma, I'd say, is kind of like your horror story about cardiovascular. But I mean, if you look at molecules like montelukast, which have been highly successful for the innovator, it only works in maybe, if you're lucky, a third of the patients. It really doesn't work that well, but it's been a blockbuster product. That probably won't sustain itself going forward. So the question is, if you're going to go into primary care, which I think and is an area of unmet medical need, and there are patients, are there genotypic profiles? Are there phenotypic? In asthma, for example, there's a lot of work taking place right at the moment about periostin or eosinophils or other more phenotypic markers to try to identify respondent populations. So I don't think there's any magic solution here. I think it requires a thoughtful approach, whether it's primary care, whether it's orphan. But I think simply piling into the orphan area because it appears to attract investor interest is a dangerous place to go.
Great. Yeah, interesting. That's a good point.
Thanks for that, sir. So one of the things that none of you brought up, and I'm just curious, do we have, and maybe this is one of the missing links, maybe not, do we have enough serial entrepreneurs, people who are willing to step up and take the risk on new ideas and be principals in a startup and take that? So we're providing facilities, talk about capital investment and good ideas. Do we have the right leadership to take those ideas and fail fast, to take them where they need to go and deliver? Because so much of what we're doing is just that. Now, you can think San Diego, you can think San Francisco, you can think Boston, sure, no problem. I think we recognize that maybe there aren't enough in the biotech, at least in the biotech space in New York City. That's a bit of a gap, and how do we fill that? I'm a Midwest guy. I grew up outside of Chicago, and there are actually some pretty good ideas between Pittsburgh and Denver that people tend to forget about. And so how do you get something out of the University of Michigan, the University of Wisconsin, Minnesota? I mean, there's opportunities there, but the mindset is not to go start. Those institutions, there's not a mindset necessarily to go start a new company. There's some, but it's infrequent compared to the hotspots, right, for biotech. So
maybe just one quick comment on that, Barry. So I think, from a Lumira perspective, we sort of pride ourselves as being quite successful in underserved markets. I'd almost consider San Diego, LA, Orange County an underserved market to some extent. But if you look at all of our successful exits and realizations, I think about 80% are between Malibu and Manhattan, basically, to sort of give it. But is there all the talent necessary in those places? R&D, ecosystem talent, as well as leadership, general management, capital raising talent? No, probably not. But that doesn't mean that you can't successfully build a company in those places. We were an early stage investor in Pharmaset, and that science came out of Atlanta. We were an early stage investor in Mako Surgical, that came out of Fort Lauderdale. I don't think people are going to walk around and say, well, South Florida is like God's gift to medical devices. But that's where it happened to kind of come from. But if you can find an initial entrepreneur who's got that sort of the GM-ish talent, who can also crystallize value and raise capital, you can plunge it into that kind of a setting and actually do it very capital efficiently, because building companies in places like the Midwest or Canada, for that matter, are much more capital efficient, and we get better returns at the end of the day. So.
It seems like we're having an interesting experiment go on right now where a lot of people from big pharma are coming out to biotech to try their hand at being a biotech exec.
How's that working?
I think that, it's going to be the classic situation where some people take to it like a fish to water, and some people really are much more comfortable in the big company setting. So we'll see. I think it really is an experiment that's going on right now.
Because I think
some people won't like it.
Yeah, so much of what we're trying to do is open that funnel, right? We're finding great ideas, we're finding ways to fund them, get people with their great ideas into incubator facilities, test those ideas. Do we have the right incentives? Where do these people come from? And do we have the right training for them to be in that space? I spent almost 10 years in a small biotech. It's exhilarating, but it's also can be tough, right? So
I think there's also a lot of entrepreneurs out there, though, too, to be honest. Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of entrepreneurs. I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs. I had someone walk in the other day, and they're like, yeah, $15 million financing, $20 million pre-money valuation, Series A. By the way, I'd like $400,000 a year. I just really? Is that really what people are thinking out there as potential leaders of these companies? Not going to happen. This is not going to happen.
I'm going to pause for a second and see if there are any questions. So some of the debate you've heard or some of the conversation. Anybody have any questions you'd like to ask? Yeah.
When you're assessing the cool ideas with low valuation. What do you really look at in your due diligence? What are the critical success factors in the due diligence that you look for?
Well, I'll approach the question from a differentiation perspective, not so much from a technical check the box, due diligence, 50 questions, 50 answers, whatever. I'm looking for, is your technology or is your product going to make a meaningful impact, does have a sustainable and compelling point of differentiation that can last a long time, somewhere in that body of that due diligence checklist? And do you have the people necessary to get you to that point? I mean, at the end of the day, everything else is important. Those are the two most important things to me, the people and the underlying science and the technology. And then the rest are just sort of pieces.
On the Rivervest side, we're looking for a very specific thing where we're willing to back kind of novel understanding of biology, so novel targets. We're much more conservative and old school about technology. So I think we would be very complementary to Bear, who's looking for something really exciting and new and breakthrough. For us, we're much more comfortable breakthrough in biology, but it's an old school antibody or small molecule, not something too newfangled, CRISPR type thing. So. But we're very, very specific and narrow in that way. So.
And is that is the equation there around risk?
Yeah, for us it is.
Okay.
We feel that you can fill in enough of the science and the biology to get comfortable with taking the clinical risk in that next step. And on the technology side, we're just less comfortable evaluating kind of the existing data on that technology to see if it's going to work in the clinic. We'd rather let our other folks that are smarter than us take
Curious,
that risk.
Stuart and Frank, how you guys, do you view it the same way in terms of, from a technology, I'm a technology guy, that's what I've done my whole career.
Yeah, I think, so breaking it maybe a bit more
ways.
granular,
Yeah.
Barry, I think, fundamentally you've got two forms of risk in the business that we're in. One is chemical and the other is biological. And if you've got both of those risks at a fairly high level, then it does become problematic. So for example, if you've got a really challenging small molecule chemistry program, and it's very tricky maybe to overcome side effects, leaving aside efficacy at the moment, and then you're combining that with a biological target that is not validated at all, then that's a fairly high risk approach. But having said all of that, there's another thing, I think, coming back to what I commented about, reimbursement. To me, it was fascinating how the whole PCSK9 story is played out. Now, there is a great example of those companies where, because if you modulate that gene, you'll get a therapeutic effect. So then it comes down to purely a risk on chemistry. The biological risk, to some extent, is taken care of. So they went through all of that, and of course, now what we see is that there are the reimbursers standing back and saying, actually, we're not going to pay all that much. And so you now hear, some of the innovators saying, well, we might actually just pull the program. So there's a fascinating thing where over and above the biology and the chemistry, you've actually got reimbursement coming in and confusing the whole PCSK9 story, which I thought was really quite interesting how that played out.
Any thoughts on how do we get out in front of that, so we don't repeat that mistake, right, from investment or from a science perspective?
Well, I suspect at the very top of the pyramid where they were originally looking to target, I think the story could have been made to add up. But the problem is they're sort of working way down the hyperlipidemia triangle into a much broader, and I think that's where the reimbursers are stepping back and saying, hang on a moment, okay, we get it up here where you've got very severe morbidity and mortality, but now you're starting to creep down almost to become a better statin. Now once you get into that pool, it's a whole different ballgame. There's a creep.
Harry, I want to make one comment to what Nancy said. So I didn't want to give the impression that Bayer is doing CRISPR therapies and stem cell therapies. This is from our Life Science Center, and we're investing in these joint ventures, which are separate companies. Bayer is a very risk-averse company, and so that's why we're using the Life Science Center to really have a little foray into these more risky technologies. I echo what Stuart and what Nancy both said with respect to the technology has to be sound, the science has to be valid, and on top of that, we are working in very strategic therapeutic areas. So you might have the best asset in neuroscience, but we're not interested because we're not in neuroscience. We're in cardiovascular disease and oncology. In women's health, primarily things like endometriosis and uterine fibroids, and then also in hemophilia, in hemostasis.
All right, thanks for that. I'm going to change the topic just a little bit, but it flows into the same discussion here. And that is, how are we doing in, I don't like using this term, but I'll use it anyway because I can't think of a better one, harvesting great ideas out of academia, funding those and getting them going, right? So, you know, I have a lot of passion in this area, and I've seen drug discovery units being built in academia. And as a taxpayer, most of them, it just infuriates me, because I think we're spending NIH money unwisely in many cases. And there's a purpose for that, I get it. You want them to be more translational in those spaces. But what do we need to do to encourage the really smart ideas to come out of academia and alleviate their fears? We're not just going to take stuff and run when I'm in a farm, from a farmer perspective. Or VC, right? You're going to milk them dry, right? So how do we get these great ideas funded and get them moving? Because again, if we have the ideas are there, we've got the mechanisms to get them going. I still sense that there's some roadblock here. There's something that path isn't greased as well as it could or should be to make that happen. And I'm just thoughts on how do we do things better with academia. Frank, I'll start with you because
I'll throw
with UCSD.
Yeah, and I'll throw out one idea. So we're piloting an idea with UCSD where I'm an EIR, as I said at the top of the panel. And you know, the biggest challenge that these centers have is that and if you go in and talk to their PIs and talk to all the folks and stuff, is, you know, and their offices of tech transfer and innovation and so forth, I mean, they basically can't write check sizes, you know, probably at the top side over a couple $100,000, give or take. And, you know, for typical VC investors who are writing, you know, at the lowest side, $4 or $5 million checks on the low side, there's a gigantic gap between about $250,000 and $4 million. And there's a lot of great science and innovation that's occurring at these places, as you said. So one idea that we're piloting, we'll be piloting at UCSD, is essentially a strategically backed translational fund, a $25 million fund at UCSD as a pilot for the UC system, where essentially, and you have to do this with schools that are fairly progressive, I think, in their thinking, because otherwise they'll have the kind of reactions that you just mentioned earlier, and they'll kind of clam up. But you know, essentially giving strategics a front row or behind the scenes, you know, look, and various kinds of bells and whistles, things without kind of, you know, being too tight on the IP and the opportunities, but essentially giving them a window into that, you know, into those worlds. And I've seen just personally in the last year or so in this role, a little less than a year, you know, probably about a dozen opportunities, at least a dozen that could be funded from that kind of a perspective. And it's literally just a funding gap, and you know, I think you have to kind of marry the business model between the source of the science, which in this case is these types of centers like UCSD, and the buyer, the customer, which is you guys. And where are their pain points on each side, what are the needs on each side, and then structure a business model in the middle that can bring them both together. And that's kind of what we're trying to do.
Anybody else thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, one problem I think is that some of the academic institutions tend to overreach quite a bit in terms of their expectations. So I had give you one example, I had an experience recently as an entrepreneur trying to get something spun out of a very prestigious East Coast institution. And what they were expecting just was not going to fly. And I said to them that, you know, as somebody who's been on the venture side, this is going to be very difficult to get anybody to invest in this with the kind of terms you're looking for. And this was just it was a root canal, a colonoscopy rolled into one, dealing with these people. And you just get to the point you think, geez, really, life's too short for this. Now, I'll give you the other end of the spectrum. Quite a few years ago, again, as an entrepreneur with a venture fund, we spun some technology out of Caltech. Now, again, I can't say whether Caltech is the same today as it was then. This was around 2006. And they were extremely reasonable. I mean, they basically said, look, you know, a lot of stuff we spin out is going to fail. Therefore, let's not, you know, get in the way of this process. And that was a very satisfactory experience, which, as it turned out, went on to be quite a good exit. Ironically enough, as usual, as often is the case, I should say, the actual exit was not really based around the original Caltech technology. But they were great to deal with. And I think that, you know, academic institutions, I'm sure, Frank, you're helping to get, you know, UCSD straightened out. If they make it too difficult for you, as the entrepreneur of the venture firm, there's so many other places people to go
Exactly.
talk to.
No, that's exactly the point I was making, Stuart, and it's a great point, which is why I think it's ripe for success at UCSD. They started with the new chancellor, pretty close, right on down in terms of innovative thinkers. It has to come from the people, the leadership, so from the chancellor all the way through to the Office of Innovation and Commercialization, and make the operating procedures easy to get IP out. One pager, flat royalties, just sign here, get it out, start investing into, don't make it so difficult to actually get this thing funded, because we'll go elsewhere.
Great. We got a few more minutes, that's good. One other topic we haven't touched on, we've talked mostly about drugs. There's a lot of other opportunities, and I'm going to avoid consumer and devices right now. Other opportunities, I think, that can help crack some of the big healthcare issues we have in front of us today. How about lifestyle changes? What do we do? What kind of tools? What kind of technologies? Any of you invest in opportunities that are more, let's say, coexistent with their therapies of various kinds and lifestyle changes in ways that can encourage people to live healthier lives and change what they do, so that we've launched a pretty big initiative within J&J, World Without Disease. That's a moonshot, to say the least. But it's about intercepting, it's about diagnosing, it's about identifying, detecting, and getting out in front of disease before you have to treat. And Bill Hunt likes to laugh at R&D and say, hey, we'll put us all out of a job. That's the goal, then everybody wins at the end of the day. We're all going to be patients at some point, right? I'm just curious, anything outside of therapeutics that you're investing in, you're thinking about, that you see that there's sort of a lot of opportunities that are out there? Because I'm sure there are folks in this room that are probably thinking that. Anybody?
I'm probably not the right person to ask
Yeah.
that question, honestly. It's not a focus for us as a fund.
Yeah, I think it is interesting. I kind of applaud what you're doing in that area at J&J. I think what is important, though, is that whatever you go into, ideally you're looking for something that's got some kind of proprietary edge to it, otherwise it can be competed away so quickly. And secondly, I think if it isn't, it needs to be subject to proper statistical trial design in order to prove, is it actually a real thing? Because there are a lot of these companies out there that make fairly outrageous claims about what their approach can benefit a particular disease area, but there really is very little data, and certainly not the data you would expect from a double-blind randomized control study the FDA would expect from a therapeutic. So I think with these approaches, if there are opportunities to bring more of a, if you like, a therapeutic type of trial design to it to see is this real or not, then I think it does get really interesting. I mean, if you look back over time at some of the big advances in healthcare, I'm talking about over time, I mean, that's 100, 200 years, often it's actually health policy that has delivered some of the biggest benefits as opposed to one particular medicine. So I think the opportunities definitely are there. It's just a question of how do you design the study to prove it's real as opposed to an artifact.
One of the things that came to my mind, and I don't know if it directly answers your question, but one of the areas that Bayer is looking to invest in, and we're already implementing this into our clinical trial designs, is e-health technologies, and sort of helping out with stratifying patients, and also big data analysis. Just getting access to these data and really trying to understand our patient populations and design better trials, so that we're not delaying the development and the access of these therapies.
Sure. Yeah, big opportunity there. We're coming up close to time, so I want to open it up for questions, or if anybody wants to share a story that they might have, a success story or a frustration that you've had, and take your first shot at J&J if you want. I'm happy to try to address that and blame somebody else. But no, I'm serious. What are the frustrations in working with if you want an audience?
Wouldn't be the first shot.
But yeah.
I have just a question about universities again, major universities. I had a conversation with one not too long ago, and they were very, we get equity, we get milestones, we get royalties, and don't try to flip this technology because we'll take it back from you. You can't just take it and flip it, to a pharma company. It wasn't. I didn't get the best feeling out of that conversation. So I was curious what your experience. Maybe I just had it was just me. But how these, you would think that by now, after all these years of licensing technologies, they would think a little bit more progressively in their own, no.
So you're saying they don't want you to take out the technology and make a lot of money from it, and then
Right,
give your money back
exactly.
to the institution,
Because
which would
then they'll
help
get
the
dumped.
people at the institution, yeah. I'd move on to another university.
Yeah,
So I was afraid of.
Just a quick question regarding like platform technologies versus solely therapeutics.
Yep.
One of the issues we get when we're approaching investors, we have a really cool platform that leads to drug discovery, but some investors say a platform only leads to a drug, whereas some investors like to see platforms because you can hit multiple markets, multiple shots on goal. What's your take on, like, I guess, business models around that for platform versus a sole therapeutic company?
I mean, I think for us, again, what I said before, we are very focused on putting our dollars to work in the clinic. So for us, it is much more important to have a clinic stage program, and we don't care which platform it came from. But that's the beauty of venture capital, that there are different strokes for different folks. And so as much as you can look at people's portfolios, where they've had success, where they still have the mandate to continue investing, if a venture firm has been very successful with an innovative platform, those are the people you should be targeting, you know, and do it very strategically, because it's just going to be a long shot if you come to us and say, I have this awesome platform, you're just going to be wasting your time. So.
And to the extent that that platform can provide a pipeline of opportunities, there's a big upside there, right, for sure. So I think you'll find a lot more, bigger audience when you have that.
Yeah, I think within pharma, I mean, we certainly are always looking for platform technology that can enable drug discovery. I mean, that's something that we certainly are eyes open.
Final comment there is, the way we like to look at that, they're enabling platforms that help us do what we do better, faster, cheaper. And then there are those that could be therapeutic platforms that could really revolutionize treatment. So, well, thank you all for your attention, and let's thank the panelists here.